may have heard in my introduction that I am an engineer. You may wonder why an engineer is here at a One Health conference. Sometimes I wonder myself too, actually. And I'm also really not an academic either. I'm not a professor. My experience as an engineer gave me a lot of insight into innovation and design and development and how to bring solutions to people. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today, which is how can we do that through entrepreneurship training in terms of trying to address some of the needs that we heard earlier this morning. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of experiences. And one is, as Lawrence just mentioned, there were some field attachments here through the previous program, through Respond, here at McCary, where we did some training of the students both before and afterwards. And I'll say a few words about that. But I've also have a lot of experience in, through my work at the University of Minnesota, working in lots of other countries. In the last 3 or 4 years I've taught in 8 countries, most of them developing countries, and really trying to figure out how do we adapt entrepreneurship training to professionals being trained in schools in these different situations. And another thing is that the University of Minnesota recently went through a strategic plan and really tried to start creating a focus on grand challenges, things like One Health or climate change or issues like that. And I'm involved this fall in teaching 4 of those classes, so I want to bring some of that experience here to this discussion. So here's a question I ask a lot of students, and we see people like this on the side of the street all over. So this guy selling mangoes on the side of the street in Mumbai, is he an entrepreneur or not? And technically, yeah, he is, right? He's a small business owner. But in reality, this is just a job for him, right? Probably he inherited this particular place and this business, and he's not trying to become the Bill Gates of mango sellers. He just wants to, sell enough mangoes to make a living, and he's never going to get enough to really expand, nor is he really thinking about that. That's not what we're talking about here with respect to entrepreneurship. What we're talking about is this video here, which I'm not going to be able to show you because it didn't survive the switch from Mac to PC. But outside the hallway, there's better than video. There's some of these young people here who are talking about some of the businesses that they're thinking of starting. So there's the young guy with the malaria, non-invasive malaria tester on a pulse oximeter by looking at certain light reflection rather, to see if you can detect malaria non-invasively or not. There's the guy, with the hydroponic fodder, growing fodder in a closed or small enclosed space. And what those are ventures that do these 2 things. So when we talk to students, when I talk to, and I use the word student to mean undergraduate, graduate, or people that aren't even in the university anymore, talk about 2 things that we want to see in these kinds of solutions. And I'm going to use the word value proposition, which is a word that you may not hear, but you all know it because you make that choice every day. And that is, why do you choose one thing over another? Right? Why do you get coffee here instead of there? Why do you have this kind of car instead of that kind of car? Why do you have this phone instead of that phone? We're all experts at making those choices, and those are just, value propositions. What is it that I value? And these ventures out here are good examples of having these 2 value propositions. One of financial, right? Is this transaction going to make sense to the person getting it? So if we look at the guy with the malaria tester out there, who's he selling that to, and why would they buy it? So he's not selling it to individuals because it's kind of expensive. It's maybe 50 or 100 bucks. US dollars, but he would sell it to a pharmacy or a small mom and pop pharmacy that may then charge people, 50 cents, 50 US or 50 cents to get a test. So he's willing to do that because he thinks he's going to make money from it. But there's also social or environmental value. So in this case, there's lots of questions about what's the problem that you're really trying to solve here. So when you go out and talk to them, keep drilling them until you get to the real answer. And in the case of the malaria tester, it's that people are treating themselves without really knowing that they have malaria. And that's not, you guys are the public health experts. That's not really a good thing. So when we work with students, we want them to see both sides of that. And that's really the essence of what we're trying to get after. The other thing is to train the person. So students come to a university to learn a depth of something. I want to be a public health nurse, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an engineer, etc. And universities are really good at teaching that. They generally suck, though, at teaching the breadth of knowledge part, which is how do we apply that? And that's really what we're trying to do with this entrepreneurship training, is how do you apply that skill that you have? And what does entrepreneurship have to do with this? It doesn't mean that we're necessarily want each one of these students to be an entrepreneur, although they could potentially. But we want them to think and act creatively, and think innovatively, and think holistically about these problems. Think about the economic issues, think about the social issues. So it's a really good leadership development process. And you'll see there's lots of similarities between what we talk about in good One Health training and good entrepreneurship training. So let me go through these pretty quickly here. These are some best practices that I try to use in these workshops. So we do semester-long classes, but also 1 to 5 day sort of boot camp things. Use the best design and business model practices. There's a lot of good information out there now about lean startup and design thinking and business model canvas. There's Coursera courses, etc., helping students figure out how to apply it to problems that they care about. Students, come to university because they care about a particular thing, and we're just trying to help them use some of these tools to help them further that knowledge. So multidisciplinary, not only in the sense of One Health, but get some business people in there, get some engineers in there, get some other types of skills on the team, as well as different cultures. Get out of the classroom. Nobody ever learned leadership sitting in a classroom. You got to get out and move and interact. Here's an example of some students on the attachment that Lawrence just talked about, both US and Macquarie students. But you just can't go out there and say, hey, now what do we do, right? You got to really spend some time really focused on how can I make the most use of this time that I'm out here and think about applying some of these techniques. Focus a lot on customer or beneficiary empathy. It doesn't really matter what I tell students. I don't care what you think about the problem. Tell me what the people that you're trying to help think about it, and how are you going to help them. So in this case in India, you want to understand how the garbage process works. You got to really follow through and work with the garbage guy all the way through to the dump. Bring in domain experts or get your students out to talk to them. This is really, I use the analogy of a teaching hospital. I don't know what all the answers to these problems are either, and I want to work together with the student to make that work. And I don't really know all the answers. And these are really hard things for professors to give up, right? In most situations, I'm the expert. I'm here at the front of the room. But you really have to come to terms with the fact that that's not always true. Connect students with mentors as much as possible. They'll learn a lot from them if you can do that. Think about big problems, so don't just narrow down on a neighborhood. But you got to start small, right? Unless you have the funding from the Clinton Foundation or something like that, you got to start small and pilot it, move fast, see what works, and keep going. And really important is the follow-up. So if you do have students that go through this and they have an idea and they want to go out and try it, figure out how to help them get going. Especially here in Kampala or Nairobi or Kigali, there's a lot of startup activity going on. Try to connect those students into that. And so that they can get out. In this case, these were, if we had seen the video, these are some students in the US who were, and India, it was a paired team looking at food safety issues and street vendors. They spent 3 months out in New Delhi working on this to see what would or wouldn't work. And most importantly, have fun. If you're not having fun, you need to find a new job and figure out something else, because it's a lot of work doing these kinds of things, and so you need to be enjoying it. So just to wrap up, opportunities going forward. So these student clubs that we have been hearing about are awesome opportunities to get started with some of these things, because I know curriculum is really hard to change. And it's hard to move some of these things in, but the student clubs operate outside the curriculum, so it's an opportunity to really create some of these opportunities for students to get out and practice some of these things. You know, on the airplane over here, I was reading a report. I do a lot of work in India, a large report from the government on entrepreneurship there. And they said there's too much focus in our schools on rote learning, not enough on critical thinking and problem solving. And I think that's true in universities and schools worldwide. And then finally, in field attachments, this is really within the One Health framework. Those of you that are part of the One Health workforce, that's really a good opportunity to start to bring in some of these entrepreneurship trainings for students. And I'll stop there. Thanks.